Hey there, I hope you're doing well. My name is Arya and today we're going to look at some more Reddit stories. If you enjoy Reddit stories, consider liking, subscribing, and maybe hitting that notification bell too. Let's get started with today's first story. Much love, everyone. Today's first story comes from caught cheating with school friend husband demands DNA test and divorce. I'm writing here to unburden myself, seek support and maybe receive some valuable free advice. My husband and I are both in our late 40s and have been married for more than 24 years. We have 3 children, 2 girls and a boy to protect our privacy. I won't go into too much detail about us, just enough to explain the situation. For the first 16 years we had a wonderful marriage. It was during that time that a brief, poorly thought out affair from my past with an old boyfriend was revealed to my husband by the ex-wife of that old boyfriend. Let me try to explain things as best I can. About 7 years into my marriage, I attended my 15-year high school reunion and my husband joined me. I was part of the alumni committee and I returned home 6 days before the event. My daughters accompanied me and my husband flew in to join us the night before the main event. He and I attended the reunion and we all stayed with my parents. However, when I was without my husband, I reconnected with my first serious boyfriend, whom I'll refer to as Reed, and I had inappropriate contact multiple times that week. At the time, Reed was also married with 2 children of his own. He claimed that his marriage was falling apart and he was unhappy. In contrast, my marriage was loving and fulfilling. Reflecting back, I believe I did it to recapture some of the excitement from my youth. The years of being a mother and a homemaker in a secure marriage made me long for excitement and risk-taking. I despise myself for this. During those 3 days we spent together, we behaved as we did back in high school, but this time we were hiding our actions from our spouses as well as our parents. We ended things 2 days before the reunion, realizing what a huge mistake we had made. We swore to have no further contact and to go on with our lives as if it hadn't happened. The reunion went well and I even introduced my husband to my old boyfriend and his wife. We all chatted for a while and with those 2 men standing side by side, I couldn't believe I had cheated on my husband, who is the love of my life and my support. I felt incredibly guilty and terrible right then, and there I promised myself that I would never tell him, because it would deeply hurt him, but I would make it up to him for the next 9 years. Our marriage was nearly as perfect as one could imagine during that period. I felt a strong urge to do everything in my power to make him happy, and I did exactly that. I gave him my all and ensured there was some form of affection for me. Every day I managed everything at home and took care of the children, so when he returned from work he could relax and enjoy his time with the family. The guilt I carried was and still is incredibly profound. However, I also found immense joy in being a devoted wife and mother to our children. In this time we had 3 kids because I gave birth to a boy. 8 years ago my husband was overjoyed to have a son and they formed a close bond from the day he was born. To be fair, my husband is an affectionate father and shows the same level of love for our daughters. Everything was going well for us until one day my husband arrived home from work early and said we needed to talk. I was concerned and thought something had gone wrong at his job. Instead, he told me he had spoken to my old boyfriend's ex-wife earlier that day. As soon as he mentioned their names, my heart started racing. I had difficulty breathing and I felt lightheaded. He proceeded to explain that she had told him her husband confessed to an affair he and I had years ago. She mentioned that her husband had been diagnosed with an aggressive form of Parkinson's disease 6 years ago and was now in an advanced stage. They had been divorced for 7 years, which I also didn't know, but she and her children still helped him with some tasks as his condition had worsened. Apparently he was consumed by guilt and he finally confessed she's remarried now, but she continued to assist her kids with his grok and some basic errands as he didn't have anyone else to her. The affair was no longer significant, but she felt a moral obligation to inform my husband, believing he should be aware. I agree with her, but I wish she had contacted me first, so I could have confessed instead of catching my husband and me off guard, I begged my husband for forgiveness, explaining that it was a long time ago and had no real impact on our relationship. I reminded him of our wonderful marriage and assured him that he and our children remain my top priority. Naturally, he was upset, hurt, and felt deeply disrespected. He became extremely angry, which was something I had never witnessed before. For the next hour, he used offensive language, including disrespectful terms, to address me. I sat there crying, not uttering a word, as I believed every word he was saying. He had been nothing but a wonderful man to me and my entire family once he finished his outburst. He left in his truck without specifying his an hour later. He called and told me he'd return in the evening. He instructed me to gather all the kids for a family meeting and to think about what I would tell them. I inquired about what he meant and I pleaded with him not to make me do this as we didn't want to burden our children. I expressed that I should be the only one suffering for this, but he insisted that they needed to know the truth about their mother. He told me not to say a word to them until he got home in the evening. I prepared dinner for the kids, but I couldn't eat much due to my nervousness. They asked where their dad was, and I informed them he'd return later as he was working. I then mentioned that he wanted to have a family meeting that night to discuss something they inquired about. Why and at what time, and I told them to be ready at 8:30. I texted my husband to inform him that we were all set for 8:30 and also asked him to call me, so we could go over what we were going to say. However, he didn't call. If you're excited about this story, please let us know. If you enjoyed the video, please press A. If not, press 0. Your feedback has inspired me to collect more uplifting and meaningful stories. Instead, he arrived promptly at 8:30 and entered the kitchen where we were all seated. His demeanor was notably different. He was no longer angry. Instead, he was cheerful, giving each of our kids a kiss and a hug. As usual, he sat down, looked at me and asked if I wanted to start. I attempted to speak but couldn't tearfully. I said I couldn't do it. He then proceeded to explain to the kids in simple terms what I had done. My daughters began to cry and express anger, while my 8-year-old son looked bewildered and frightened. My daughters asked when this had all happened, and I told them it occurred years ago and I couldn't recall the exact year. My son, with a fearful expression and tears in his eyes, asked his dad if he was going to leave us. Hearing this, I began to sob, uncertain about what my husband would say. Thankfully, he assured our son that he wasn't leaving but mentioned that he would be sleeping in the spare twin bed in his room for a while. He asked our son if that was okay and our son eagerly replied, "Sure, Dad." My husband explained to the kids that things were going to be challenging for a while, and he wanted them to understand that things between us might not be quite the same for some time, if ever. He assured them that things in their world would remain unchanged and advised them to bring up any discomfort to us, so we could address it promptly. Our marriage was never the same after that day, and it took nearly 13 months before we began to regain some sense of being husband and wife. It wasn't full intimacy, but he gradually allowed some forms of physical contact. This continued for the next 3 months, but only when he was in the mood. He wouldn't initiate anything with me, but I would push things as far as he'd permit daily. Eventually, we did start sharing love again, but he couldn't do it while looking at me, and the tenderness wasn't the same as before. He explained that when he saw my face, he imagined my old BF, which immediately killed his excitement. I didn't quite understand this, but my therapist mentioned that it's not uncommon. She said that for some men this is a way to regain their masculinity that was compromised by the affair, while it might seem selfish and one-sided on his part. For me, it's a turn-on for some unknown reason, and I eagerly anticipate these moments. Nonetheless, I wish we could return to the way things used to be. My husband was so giving before and always made sure I was satisfied. Now, he doesn't seem to care about my feelings, and I think he just uses me as a way to release his desires. He's told me that he won't do things for me like I do for him. If you catch my drift to him, I somehow feel permanently tainted in that aspect. It's bizarre, I know, but that's how things have been for the last 3 years. I've grown accustomed to it and accepted it as our new normal. All things considered, everything was going pretty well between us until this past January. It was during this time that something that should have been an enjoyable exercise turned into something that set us back months in our healing process. The wounds from the past affair were reopened, and we found ourselves even further behind than we had been. It was then that my son came home and told his dad and me during dinner about a project. His 8th grade history class was working on the project involved, mapping our family history in America. As far back as possible, the teacher suggested that students could use reports from genetic testing companies, but it wasn't mandatory. He said his friends were planning to use them and he wanted to do the same. My husband suggested that we should do it, mentioning it. Something he's been interested in for a while. I smiled and agreed with them, and we finished dinner, spending the rest of the night watching a movie. My attention wasn't really on the movie, though, as my mind was occupied by something else, something I knew could potentially jeopardize everything we had worked hard to rebuild up to that point. While I was quite certain that my husband was my son's biological father, there was a slim chance he might not be, given the timing of his conception during the alumni week when I had been with both men. I know what you're probably thinking and I understand your perspective, but I want to be honest. After the movie, my son went to his room and my husband and I began getting ready for bed. It was at that moment I asked my husband to sit down with me because I had something important to tell him. I then explained precisely when the affair took place and mentioned the slight possibility that our son might not be his biological child. He buried his face in his hands and then shot an angry glare at me. I wasn't sure what he would do next. He got up, packed a bag, took his shaving kit and left. I asked him to stay and discuss it, but he just left. I didn't want to alarm my son about what was happening, so I let my husband leave without resistance. I called and sent him texts, but he didn't respond until the next morning when he called to say he was coming home to talk. I felt a sense of relief and believed we could work through this, given all that we had been through and the progress we had made when he walked through the door. I grabbed him and asked him to look into my eyes. He hesitated, but I held him tightly, locking my arms around both his arms and his midsection. Eventually, he looked at me somewhat frustrated and I told him, "You are the only man I've ever loved." I said I was willing to do anything for him and he knew that. Then I explained that I was 99% sure he was our son's biological father and that I had only brought this up, so he was aware of the slight risk. He asked if I was done and then said, "Why didn't you tell me this 4 years ago, when I found out about your affair, or better yet, why didn't you tell me this 13 years ago, right after you had the affair, or even better? Yet why didn't you just not cheat with your old BF and be a decent wife to me and a good mother to your children?" This broke me and I cried, saying that I would change things if I could, but I couldn't. I could only control my actions from now on. He then explained what was going to happen next. He explained that the entire family would take ancestry tests and if our son's test came back negative, he would be the one to tell him. Then he would divorce me and I would give him full custody of our son. I agreed to this, but told him I was confident that he was our son's father. I also asked if we could still share our bed and continue our relationship where we left off. He refused and said I would need to sleep on the pull-out couch in our bedroom. For now I was disappointed but accepted it, as at least he was still willing to share the same room with me. We all took the ancestry tests and thankfully the results showed that my husband was indeed our son's father. After getting the results, my husband helped our son complete his class project. He told me he was relieved and I thought things would return to the way they had been, but they haven't. I'm still sleeping on the couch and my husband has become distant. He only spends time with me when our son is present or when our daughters are home. He has also joined a local hiking club as the vice president, so most evenings after dinner, if he's not with our son, he's out hiking with the club or working with the board. This has been going on for nearly 4 months and I'm feeling lonely and left out. I want my husband back, the one I used to have before he found out about my affair. Does anyone have any suggestions for what I could do in addition to what I'm already doing? As I mentioned earlier in this post, I've done everything I can think of for him, but I haven't been able to break through his emotional barriers. I know he'll never forget what I've done and may never forgive me, but I'm willing to accept that as long as we can get back to the love and mutual admiration we once had for each other. My feelings for him are stronger than ever, but I fear he has fallen out of love with me. Thank you for reading this and understanding my situation update. I'm back to quickly answer some common questions. First question answer. My old boyfriend and I dated during most of high school. I ended the relationship shortly after starting college because the long-distance thing wasn't working for us. Second question, I reconnected with him when I returned home and that's how we got in touch. Each of us on the reunion committee had a list of names to call and confirm attendance, and I purposely chose the list with his name on it. You could say I initiated contact at the time. I wanted what happened to happen, and after it did, I felt terrible guilt, which has made me a better person. Third question, my husband has never pressured me into anything. I've willingly done everything with him, and most of the time I've taken the initiative. While I do wish he'd hold me and show me affection, as he did before, I've accepted our new life and appreciate any attention he gives me when he's happy. I'm happy. Fourth question. My husband is never cheated on me. I'm certain of this, because his focus has always been 100% on his family. He's a good man, an excellent father and the best husband. Although our relationship has changed, I'm sure most women here would envy what I have and gladly trade places with me. Update 7 months after the original post. Hello, everyone, I'm here to give you a quick update on the current status of my relationship with my husband. Sadly, my husband has decided that he wants a divorce as I type this out. It fills me with sadness, sorrow, and regret. These have been my overwhelming feelings since he told me about his decision a month and a half ago. I did everything I could to try to change his mind, but he had already made up his decision. He explained that the past 5 years have been miserable for him and he assumed they must have been tough for me as well. I told him I wasn't miserable and that simply being around him brought me joy. I begged him to reconsider, but it was clear that he had made up his mind. He expressed his desire to start a new life for himself, hoping I would do the same. He thanked me for the years before my unfaithfulness and for the effort I put into trying to salvage our marriage. Nevertheless, he said the affair, along with my dishonesty and lack of transparency, had damaged his ability to trust me completely beyond the affair. He acknowledged that I had been a great mother and he wanted us to remain close and be good parents after the divorce. For the sake of our kids, we're working out the details outside of the courtroom, so the legal proceedings will be more of a formality. We have such a good relationship that his lawyer even questioned once whether we were sure about getting a divorce. I express my reluctance, but I respect my husband's decision. Everything should be finalized within the next year. One of the most challenging tasks will be selling the family home. We built together the place where we conceived and raised our children, while we'll both make a substantial amount from the sale. Property prices in the area have increased so much that I wouldn't be able to afford a new one on my own. I'm currently searching for an apartment for my new place. My husband has similar plans but intends to buy a new place, possibly closer to his workplace. Our kids are handling it well, and my son has been incredibly supportive. He's truly a guardian angel. Having my son around has helped me through some really tough times. My daughters have been supportive too, but they're both busy with school and don't visit home that often. I'm planning to start job hunting later this year, but for now I'm taking a couple of months off to focus on self-improvement. Over the past 5 years, the stress in my life has taken a toll on me, leading to some weight gain. My doctor has warned me about high blood pressure and my weight. I don't turn to alcohol, so I use food as a way to cope when I'm under stress. Unlike my husband, I don't exercise or eat healthily, which has caused me to gain quite a bit of weight, especially recently. My goal is to return to the weight I was when we first got married. In conclusion, I want to express my gratitude to everyone for the thoughtful responses and their concern for my well-being. I never thought my life was that interesting, but apparently it is. Please don't feel sorry for me. I'll be fine. The darkest days are behind me, and I'm moving towards a brighter future. Who knows, my husband might change his mind or return to me in the future. Stay grateful, all right? That was a fun story. Now, let's move on to another, exciting one. Stay tuned and let's dive in story 2. If I could offer one piece of advice regarding divorce, it would be not to pursue. Do it under normal circumstances. In my case, there was no offense. We were together for 8 years, which were mostly good, and we have 4 children around the 5-year mark. I received a job promotion and I started to believe that my ex-husband was somehow holding me back from more success and a better life. We didn't have much money, but with my promotion I was now earning more than he was. I began working longer hours while his hours were reduced, so he spent more time at home. I started to resent him for being at home and for having the opportunity to spend time with our kids most evenings. When I returned home, the children were either getting ready for bed or already asleep. After a few months in my new job, it became clear to me that things at home weren't going well when I wasn't there. Some nights, the dishes weren't done when I arrived or the kids hadn't eaten, and I would find something to be upset with him about no matter how trivial. I was angry, and it didn't really matter what it was about. He kept saying he would try harder, but he also mentioned how difficult it was being home all the time. That just made me even more furious. Over the next couple of years, things continued to deteriorate. My work hours remained long and his job was sporadically full-time. There was never a good time for him to work full-time given my schedule, but we needed the money whenever he mentioned that he could take on extra hours. I would complain the fewer hours he worked, the more I would gripe that he wasn't earning enough money. If he pointed out the inconsistency, I would tell him to figure it out. I knew this bothered him, so I started saying it frequently, using it as an excuse for many things. I truly resented him and I withdrew from the relationship. I understood that my actions hurt him, but I didn't care. I believed that if he wanted to avoid getting hurt, he should at least try to make me happy. I used this justification when I began talking to another man at work. Initially, I considered him just a friend, but our conversations at work turned into text messages at home. These messages then led to exchanging pictures and videos, and eventually we tried to find ways to spend time alone together. I knew it was wrong, but it made me feel alive, which my husband hadn't made me feel in years. I was weary of being unhappy, and I was doing this for myself. The worst moment was when I arrived home at a reasonable time and discovered that he had cleaned the entire house, prepared dinner for the family, and selected a movie for all of us to watch together a couple of years earlier. This would have delighted me, but that night I couldn't even look at him and I faked being sick. I spent the entire evening in bed while he waited on me, checked on me, and even brought me different food in bed. It made me feel awful, and then I became angry that he made me feel that way by the end of the night. I was texting with the other guy over the next month or 2 from that night. It didn't matter what he did. He seemed wrong just for existing most days. He would get so upset with how I treated him, and I would deliberately provoke him into losing his temper, because I knew it would happen sooner or later. After most of our fights, he would apologize for something I told him. He did wrong if there even was anything, but I never did. Instead, I would often find a way to make him feel even worse. I believed I was right because he was wrong, and that was all that mattered to me. I even pretended not to care when he found out about my relationship with the guy from work. It pained me internally to see him holding back tears, but I wasn't going to let him see that he was at his most vulnerable when I chose to tell him that I wanted a divorce. I could almost hear his heart breaking inside his chest. He pleaded and fought, saying we could work through it together. I wasn't really interested in fixing our marriage, but I mostly ended things with the other guy only because I knew I could go back to it. If I wanted, I could see he was trying, and occasionally I would acknowledge that, but most of the time I was incredibly harsh to him for any and all reasons I could think of. I'm not sure what more the man could have done to make me happy aside from finding a job that paid enough for me not to have to work at all. He said he was looking, but looking and finding a job are 2 different things. It was around this time that I discovered this group and a few others. I started posting things about him solely from my perspective, and I received a lot of positive feedback about how I was feeling, which reinforced my belief that I was right. The more I posted, the more validation I received. It wasn't just me who believed that my ex-husband wasn't worth keeping around. The entire internet was telling me how terrible he was. I began saying terrible things to him and even outright ignoring him. I was so confident in my opinion and the opinions of others that I contacted a lawyer and, within a couple of weeks, had filed for divorce. I kept using this website and a couple of others to find validation for my feelings and get encouragement to go through with the divorce, and eventually I went ahead with it. The process went relatively smoothly. My ex-husband didn't ask for much except not to get divorced and to try to work things out. I didn't care about that, though he was shattered, but I felt liberated. I had the freedom to do as I pleased without feeling guilt or having to answer to anyone. It was an incredible sense of freedom. However, this feeling didn't last long. In the first month after he moved out, I missed garbage day 3 times. The dishes rarely got cleaned and the laundry piled up for so long that I had to do the sniff test to see if it could be worn again. I also rarely saw my kids happy. My oldest had seen some messages from the other guy months earlier, and she knew my ex-husband still wanted to try to work things out. It didn't take her long to stop talking to me altogether, except to express her desire to go to my ex-husband's house. The other kids also told me they wanted to live with him. I tried to make them happy but ended up just buying them toys all the time, and the happiness was short-lived. I was also struggling at work, being alone. I couldn't work all those extra hours that were expected of me. Eventually, I gave in and started calling my ex-husband to watch the kids. He always came over as soon as he could, asking if I needed anything. When I returned home, I'd find clean dishes, laundry done, and even dinner prepared. At times he didn't say much after I got back, just advised me to call him if I needed anything and left. He always looked so sad when it was time to go. Finally, after a couple of months, my friends convinced me to go on a date. It was for dinner and a movie, and I was initially excited and hopeful. But during dinner an overwhelming sense of guilt started to consume me, and it got so bad that I didn't even make it to the movie. About a week later, after shedding countless tears, I found myself on a therapist's couch. I recounted everything that had transpired, starting with the work promotion. The therapist didn't agree with me or the encouragement I had received for the divorce. I ended up visiting her office 2 and sometimes 3 times a week. The more I talked to prove that I was right, the more I began to realize how wrong I had been. It was truly heart-wrenching. I'm not sure if I had ever cried as much in my whole life as I did in the first month in her office after spending around $2,000 on therapy sessions. I came to realize that while my ex-husband had his faults, I had far worse flaws. I did so many terrible things and said awful things that I wouldn't want to be with me. Yet he did. I still remember a moment when he asked me during a meeting with the lawyer not to proceed with the divorce. However, I went through with it, and later I boastfully shared on this platform how great it felt. I was completely wrong, and now I can see it. A couple of weeks ago, I approached him as he was leaving the house and asked about the possibility of getting back together. When he looked at me, his eyes welled up with tears and a couple rolled down his cheeks. He explained that he didn't know if he could. He said that the pain had been too much for too long, and he feared that if we reunited, I might hurt him once again. He mentioned that he had always hoped I would realize how much he loved me up until the moment I signed the divorce papers, and he released an exaggerated sigh of relief. He confessed that this hurt him more than anything else and that he wasn't sure if he could ever trust me again. I don't blame him. I essentially broke a man who, looking back, was a great husband. I deprived my children of having a wonderful father at home, and I took his children away from him. As for myself, the one who pushed for divorce in search of happiness and freedom, I now spend most of my free time either sitting at home or on a therapist's couch. Please don't solely rely on the advice of anyone on this website or any other regarding divorce. If your marriage is going through a rough patch, start by examining yourself and consider making changes. This advice is for both men and women. Divorce is not enjoyable, and life post-divorce is not a walk in the park. Witnessing your husband broken and your children perpetually unhappy due to your actions is one of the most painful experiences I can imagine. I wish all of you the best and hope you'll give your marriages a second chance. I'm going to turn this one over to you. What do you make of this situation? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and as always, a huge thank you from the bottom of my heart for getting involved in today's stories. Your love, support, and time mean the world to me. So, thank you so much for being part of this. I really appreciate your time. I'll see you in the next one. Take care and much love.